Good evening. Welcome back. We've got a chilled stream this evening. Taking a break from politics because I don't know about you, but my entire internet is just everything on the internet is filled with everything politics at the moment, which is naturally understandable. So we're going to be covering a tweet I put out a few weeks ago, which was low maintenance women have high maintenance hobbies. And I've had a few discussions about this anyway, and it was kind of decided that one of those hobbies was gardening. And it was very much agreed. Would you agree with that? So the main low maintenance woman hobby was gardening.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and it is a high maintenance hobby, which we will go into in more depth. But before we start and really get into this, I have to give a shout out to the whole of the Lotus Eaters crew for doing their live stream last night, covering the election. They did incredibly well, and it was the most streamed and most viewed election coverage in this country. So hats off to them. Well done very much for doing that. So should we get into it? Gardening. I mean, it is high maintenance. I would consider myself to be a low maintenance woman. I don't yet my nail. I've never had my nails done. Let my hair do what it likes. I am not into all that stuff at all, but I do have some very high maintenance hobbies. Turtle, I believe you have some questions regarding gardening.
I have several questions right here in a piece of paper in front of me. Before I get into the questions, though, I would like to hear your definition of what a low maintenance woman is.
Okay. So my opinion and definition of a low maintenance woman is a woman who does not spend all her time preening herself. She doesn't. Obviously, she looks after herself. Let's not get that confused with a woman who just lets herself go. She looks after herself. Quite natural is how I would put it. Doesn't make a point of dressing up for other people. You dress up for your husband. That's it. In comparison to what I would consider to be a high maintenance woman, who gets their hair done every month, who constantly has their nails done, who is always preening, who takes loads of time doing their hair and makeup in the morning, who's always constantly concerned about how their image comes across to other people. And by that I mean things that can be altered in terms of your image. So your eyelashes, your makeup, how tight your clothes are, etc. All those things that constantly need attention and preening and always looking in the mirror and making sure you don't have a hair out of place. That's my opinion / definition. Does yours differ from that?
I think it's along the same lines. I would have said a high maintenance woman turns her creative energy towards her vanity. A low maintenance woman turns her creative energy outwards into her environment.
Yeah, incredibly well put. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To be honest, couldn't agree more.
Okay.
Full as that. Now everybody knows. So we've established that gardening is a high maintenance hobby. Now, just to clarify for those who are wondering what we mean by that, as a gardener myself, it takes up a lot of time. It can be expensive, does not have to be. I'm very much a sort of make, do, amend, thrift, do it on a budget kind of gardener. And you can achieve a hell of a lot with that, but it does require a lot. So as you just said, all of that attention is diverted outwards. And in my case, it's diverted towards gardening. And there are many forms of gardening. There's allotment gardening, there's your garden at your house, there's balcony gardens, there's so much you can do. And the way I would the way I always see it is the garden is an extension of your home. So that's my take on it. So do you want to add anything to that, or do you just want to jump straight into to grilling me with your question?
Okay. I think, okay, question one. I think it ties into what you said about how you view gardening as simply an extension of your home. And I'm comparing your high maintenance hobby with my high maintenance hobbies. And I believe that our hobbies are sort of investment. And I'm wondering, what kind of investment would you say gardening is?
What kind of investment gardening is? Definitely time-wise, you do have to invest a hell of a lot of your time, and passion as well. You know, there are so many levels of gardening, and I always like to share my tips and tricks and gardening experience with other people, because there is so much to gain and share with gardening. So in terms of like what investments there are, time and passion are probably the two biggest investments, which really don't cost you anything. You know, you can make time to do that. If you've got passion for it, great. Obviously not everybody has got a passion for gardening, and that's absolutely fine. But passion can also grow. So, you know, that's the two things I would definitely say.
Okay. And how would you say gardening makes your life better?
Many ways.
Okay.
Many ways. I'll jump back to when I was a child. My grandparents always had a gorgeous garden. My mum has always gardened and still does, so I learned a lot of what I know from my mum. And it's very much a case of it brings so much to my life because it's something that I really enjoy doing. It boosts my mood. There's a bit of a running theme. I don't know if you've ever watched Gardener's World at all,
No.
the BBC program. It is worth a watch, but we do tend to have a bit of a running joke in this house of if they say certain words or certain phrases, then you drink, and it becomes very interesting after a while. But it is quite a cozy sort of comfort program. But they always tend to touch on gardening and mental health. And you know, at first I was kind of like, you know, this is a bit of a gimmick. They always go, well, gardening improves your mental health. But actually going into the science of it, there is a lot of truth in that. In terms of the actual soil itself. If you're digging soil, whether it may be, you know, with a spade or a hand trowel, or even just potting up a plant, there are actually microbes in the soil that boost your serotonin levels. So if you are actually, you know, in the soil, getting your hands in the soil, doing a bit of gardening, even if it's just pulling out a weed, that still has that serotonin boost, which is something I never really thought about when I first got into gardening. It wasn't anything I ever looked into. However, I did know there was kind of that stigma about it. But it was also a case of I did used to use it as my escape. I still do in a lot of ways. I have quite a busy life, and I do like to just escape into the garden. So I can quite literally just go into my own little space, in as much of a sense as my garden is quite open, and it is tourist season, so we do tend to get people walking up the driveway. But yeah, I mean, I take quite a lot from it. I get quite a lot from it. So it's not just it boosts my mood. You know, it's kind of grown into, I enjoyed doing it with my family when I was younger. I enjoyed learning about it because gardening always has something to learn. It is always a school day in the garden. You're always learning something, whether, you know, you might think you know absolutely everything about one specific type of plant, but you try and plant it in your own garden, or your friend tries to plant it in their garden and something goes wrong. So you kind of figure out what's going wrong, whether the soil's correct, you know, all of these elements that come into it. So there is that aspect of learning about it as well, which is always fun. You're always learning something. That's the joys of gardening, as it were, because it's not a case of everything is going to be perfect all the time. You know, it is very much a what I would like to call a reality hobby. So you might put your whole life and dedication into it, but something might still go catastrophically wrong. So it is very much a real sort of experience in terms of its very firsthand experiences. Coming up to sort of now and more present time and what I get out of gardening, I still get all of the things I just mentioned, but I also get a little bit of sense of pride because as I just mentioned, a lot of people do see my garden now, so it's not just for myself anymore. I do like to make the garden look nice for other people who walk past the house or come up specifically to see my garden. I have won awards for the garden, which is, that was a bit of a shock last year. I won a Wildlife Gardening Award. I have been nominated again this year, so I'm waiting to hear whether or not I've achieved in that one. But again, that's kind of an ongoing thing as well. It's I now have kind of that sense of pride, which some people would think, oh, you shouldn't have that sense of pride. But no, I am proud because I know how much dedication I've put into that garden, and actually having complete strangers telling you that they like your garden is always nice to hear. If somebody walks past your house and goes, oh, I really like that plant in the pot, or I like your hanging baskets, or anything like that, it does put a smile on your face. And if I am, walking down the street, or even if I go on holiday somewhere out country and I see someone's garden I like, especially if they're in the garden, I will tell them, I will say, I love those roses, or, I will tell them that I absolutely love it, because that they've put time into that. So people in general get a lot out of gardening, but me personally, that's I get so much out of it, and it really has changed my life. Not in a deep, not a deep dive into that nonsense, but no, I do love it.
I'm surprised that people would say you shouldn't be proud, because you've worked on something quite hard, and it's made someone else's life better simply by looking at it and experience it. And if you worked hard and it made someone else's life better, you should feel good. That's the natural response,
Absolutely.
right?
I mean, one thing I have kind of butted up against, especially in the village I am in at the moment, there are a lot of paid and hired gardeners. Now, I did garden for a neighbour for nearly a year, and I did get paid for it. And some people have come up. I've had this experience personally. I've been in the garden. They've come up and seen me in the garden, and they said, do you have a business card? And I didn't know what they meant. I said, oh, well, what do you mean? And they said, oh, you work on this garden. I said, yes, it's my garden. And they assumed that I was a hired-in gardener. Now that's the careful sort of step you have to be aware of, I think, especially if it is perhaps an older generation who owns the house and they do have a gardener. I don't see anything wrong with hiring a gardener. Absolutely fine. It's a great job to have, and I respect all the gardeners out there. I know quite a few of them. And if you, the only thing I would say and hope is that if somebody comments on your garden and gives you a compliment on your garden, and you personally haven't put the work into it, and it is your gardener, I would hope that you would say, oh, thank you. It's my gardener does this for me. My gardener so and so, and you actually tell them, one, the truth, and two, you give that credit to the gardener themselves. I'm not saying the homeowner has had no say in it whatsoever. You can work together on these things. But always appreciate where the work is actually being put in. Definitely.
Right. Give credit where it's due. It sounds
Absolutely.
very familiar to, I'm a housekeeping nerd. I love to clean. I had a business in it. When my husband watches me clean, he thinks I'm doing a chore. I don't. It feels amazing. You work hard, you step back, you look at the good job, and it's like, I made this house better. So, I mean, someone hiring a gardener to me is no different than someone hiring a housekeeper. They may not be able to do it, but they want to be able to have the benefit of, a beautiful garden or a nice clean home. So, but I don't know if it could if it gets as much notice as a beautiful garden as a clean house does. I don't know anyone who's come into my home and be like, your toilet is so clean. I love it. You know, I mean
Yeah.
that'd be nice. But it's not the same thing. But I
Yeah.
understand. You know, I understand that, you know, hard work, you enjoy it, you made someone else's life better. And, you know, doing it professionally, if you can get paid for it, you know, it's more of a bonus.
Definitely, definitely. And I think the other key thing to remember as well is don't compare your garden to someone else's, because 9 times out of 10, your garden has a different history. It's got different soil structure. You may have a different climate altogether. You know, I live in Cornwall, and my garden, and especially my sort of blooms and my flowers, are almost 2 weeks ahead of that of, you know, my other half's parents. And they live in Devon, and we're actually 2 weeks ahead. So when they go, oh, you know, my dahlias haven't bloomed and yours have, and I said, yes, but we live near the coast. It's slightly warmer. We have a different climate, you know, etc., etc., etc. Do not always compare yourself to other gardeners. So just because your flowers haven't bloomed as quickly as theirs, or your plant might not be as big as theirs, you know, be proud of what you've achieved, because you have done that. You know, it's not a case of, you know, you failed because theirs is bigger and brighter, or you end up getting that big headedness of, well, my garden's clearly better than yours, because, you know, don't do that. Don't do that.
Right. So see the differences as more as an opportunity to learn about how different plants behave rather than simply
Yeah,
competition. Yeah.
absolutely. And getting discussions going as well. You know, if something isn't working well in your garden but it's working better in your neighbor's garden, then have a chat with them. You know, what are you doing differently? You know, how can we help each other out here? You know,
Mhm.
it's not a case of, well, I want to be better than them, which in gardening is very much apparent. There is always that competition there, you know, especially with, you know, gardening shows, you know, Chelsea Flower Show, Hampton Court, all of these giant gardening competitions and shows. There is always competition, even with village shows. You know, there's always competition, especially when it comes around gardening. You know, who's got the biggest vegetables, who's got the brightest flowers. And I will admit there are a few people even in the village I'm in who are very much like, no, it's a trade secret. And
Mm.
those of us who know it's not a trade secret. We just know they use certain pesticides, or they, you know, they do things that perhaps you don't do in your garden. So one thing I'm very particular on in my garden is I don't use any chemicals, and I don't use any chemical pesticides or fertilizers. Everything is a natural fertilizer or a natural pesticide, etc. So I don't use any of the, you know, shop bought chemical things, whereas I know a lot of people in the village do. And yes, they may have better flowers or whatever, but I've got bunnies in my garden and loads of wildlife, and I've won an award for it. So I must be doing something right. And
Hmm.
that's my way of gardening. You know, they want to do it their way, fine, but I'm going to do it my way.
Right. I would view your way as not cutting corners, you know,
Yeah.
where I feel like using pesticides, et cetera, would be. Oh gosh, that's just branched into two different questions for me. The immediate thing about pesticides, I think you said you used garlic once to deter insects, right?
Yes. Yeah, I
Um,
still do. My famous garlic spray.
oh, okay. You make a garlic spray. And I think I remember asking you about using citrus to
Yes.
deter insects. Can you explain to me the difference between using garlic and using citrus?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the citrus, because I don't actually use citrus very much in my garden, because I find that it doesn't work particularly well for my style of garden. It can work very well on smaller gardens, sort of patio gardens or around pots. Um, so it's a bit like, so when I say citrus, the easiest way I can describe it is, you know, citronella candles that ward off mosquitoes. You know, have a
Hmm.
nice summer evening, you have those citronella candles. They do have citrus in them, and the citronella compound, which can be found in a lot of citrus fruits. So your oranges, your lemons, your limes, etc. I'm not saying go and stick a lime in a pot. Don't do that. But the best thing to do, especially if you've got things like, so let's say bugs and insects are your main problem at the moment. So there's
Mhm.
two separate pests we're talking about here with your citrus and your garlic. We're talking about two different types of pests. Is the easiest way to differentiate the two. So the citrus will ward off your gnats, your sort of some forms of whitefly, not all. Of course, this varies in different climates, in different gardens, in different countries. So always do your research before you go putting citrus peels in your pots. And it can affect the acidity of the soil as well. So that's something to be aware of. But the easiest way to deal with that sort of thing is literally get a bit of orange peel and put it around the base of your plant on the soil, and it will ward off a lot of those insects. However, crossing over to the garlic spray, the citrus will attract ants. It will attract slugs, different forms of pest. So my garlic spray has become a bit of a phenomenon. So I've shared this recipe with so many people. I'll put it on my Twitter for those who want it. I have told friends and family about this. I've told neighbors. I've told colleagues at work. Everybody asks about my garlic spray. Now, I am a lover of hostas. I love hostas. I've got quite a few of them in pots. And slugs and snails love hostas. They will eat the whole thing in one night. It will disappear. Same with a lot of your vegetables. So your beans, your lettuces, your salad crops, things like that. Slugs and snails will annihilate the lot in an evening. So what I do is I use a garlic spray, and I use this on my dahlias as well. It's my go-to, no fail, providing you use it correctly, natural pesticide. Now, slugs and snails hate garlic. Now, I don't know why, and I don't know the reason behind this, but they will not eat your plants. Don't hold me to this. If anybody uses this and then goes, buddy, they ate my plants even after I used this, then you must be using it wrong. Don't come at me, okay? So I make up this garlic spray, and it literally consists of garlic and water. That is it. So I make a concentrate by boiling a whole bulb of garlic, and it does make the house smell of garlic for a while. I will warn you now. So I make a little concentrate, and then it's literally a 1 to 10 ratio. You don't need much at all. And I put it in a spray bottle, and in the evenings I will go out and spray my plants with it. And of course, if it rains, you need to go and do it again. But it works like a charm, and it doesn't bother the birds. So the birds will still eat the slugs, the snails that may be harboring around the edges of the pots because they can't get up to the leaves. They don't want to go near the garlic. Doesn't bother the birds at all. Doesn't bother rabbits, doesn't bother mice. So obviously, if you want a deterrent for rabbits, I would not suggest using garlic spray because they do not care about garlic spray. I've used it without fail. It is my golden natural pesticide because it doesn't actually harm anything. It won't harm your plants. It won't harm any of the pests because even, all gardens have pests, but at the end of the day, they were there before you. It's part of nature. They're just looking for some food. So all I'm kind of doing is deterring them from eating my plants. Go and eat somebody else's. Go and eat the plant I haven't sprayed because that's my own fault. So that's what I would say about the two pesticides.
Okay, nice. Leading on to pests, would you say, do you have a deer problem there, or do you find deer eat your plants?
Not in the garden. Up the allotments, however, we have come across quite a few deer, but it's not a massive problem at the moment because they have been, again, encouraged to go elsewhere. Because we have to put a stock fence up because we share the field with a farmer anyway. So again, just encourage them to go elsewhere.
Okay. Oh my gosh, here's my list. Let's see. I'm interested about how you handle the changing seasons and if what you can get in one season can benefit another season. That may be a nonsensical question, but I'm wondering what the change of seasons and the plants looks like for you.
Yeah. We'll start with winter. Winter here is quite dire and not an awful lot grows. I do put in some winter crops, and I'm planning to do some winter brassicas up the allotment as well, which quite like a bit of a hard frost. So if you can kind of time your planting, with plants that like the winter, or plants that, especially things like roses that might have a really nice sort of rose hip once the actual flower goes itself, you've got that kind of structure in your garden. That's something else to think about. So you might not have those bright colors all throughout the year, but you can incorporate other things. So another good plant is ferns. So I've got a few different ferns. You can grow them in pots as well. And I've got a couple in pots, and I've got a couple sort of variegated ferns. So this time of year, it's the particular one I've got, and I can't remember the scientific name for it, but it's a gorgeous sort of orangey auburn at the moment. So the fronds are actually orange, and it will hold its shape, give or take, fully throughout all the seasons, but it will change color. So it will go from sort of orangey auburn, and then go to a lighter green, and then a darker green, and then it will do its cycle all over again. So if you want to keep interest throughout the seasons, it's very much worth looking at plants that either hold the interest. Certain types of trees are good for this as well. That will either have some structure, or have change in color, etc., or evergreens that will literally, in the name, will stay green, and you can get some variations that will not drop their leaves. So that's always something to consider. This is probably my favorite time of year for gardening, because everything is happening in my garden in terms of growing the vegetables, and my dahlias are flowering, and that's my favorite flower, because there are so many different kinds. So I have got dahlias in pots, and I love them to pieces, and they're doing their best this year. Touch wood, this is the best year I've had for dahlias.
Nice.
So again, I have had my ups and downs with gardening, which is very normal. But you always have challenges throughout every season. There's always a challenge. You've always got to be watching, and that, I would say, is the most important thing to be doing throughout the 4 different seasons, is watch your garden, whether it be a giant garden, a balcony garden, pots, whatever. Watch it, see what it's doing. Does it need propping up? Does it need a plant support? Does it need moving to a more appropriate space? Does it need more moisture in the soil? Keep watching it, see what the leaves are doing, see what the flowers doing. If it has flowers, of course, see how happy that plant is, and then you can learn from that and change it, etc., throughout the seasons. If you have to move a pot from winter to summer, etc., then do that. If you want your plants to do that, then do that. Work with the seasons. Don't try and force a plant to survive in conditions it's not used to. But at the same time, if you want a bit more of a relaxed garden, you want to be a bit less hands-on and not worrying about bringing the pots in or moving them, constantly watching them, then again, do a bit of research. And it doesn't have to be, sitting, trawling through the internet or reading millions of books. You can literally go to a garden centre and read the label on the pot, and it 9 times out of 10 will tell you enough of what you need to know. So, it's entirely down to you as the gardener to sort of, again, work with the seasons. Don't try and work against nature. It is nature at the end of the day, so work with it. Let the plants work with what they are comfortable with.
Okay. I had some aloe vera plants, and I had to take them in for the winter. And when the weather got nice, I put one outside and left one indoors, but the one that I put outside died within a week.
Yeah.
And I must have done something wrong. I don't know if I shocked it into going outside.
The first thing I would definitely say to that is, yes, you can do this. It's not a problem to put your indoor plants outside during the better days, etc. But do it gradually. So do it sort of, don't put them out at the hottest time in the day. Do it maybe 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day, 3 hours. So you actually gradually put them out so they can acclimatize to being outside. Because don't forget, it's not just the heat you have to contend with, or the cold. It's not just the temperature. You've also got the strength of the wind. You've also got moisture levels to contend with. So it's a bit like when the easiest way, we call it hardening off, when it comes to sort of like your vegetables. If you're growing seeds in the greenhouse and then they get to a certain point, you're like, right, they're ready to go out, but I'm not going to put them out straight away and stick them in the ground. I'm going to harden them off first. And it's exactly the same process of they've been in a nice cozy greenhouse and everything is controlled, but they're about to go outside. So you need to get them acclimatized to the wind, to the moisture, to the temperature. So you gradually put them out more and more each day. And depending on the plant, it can take 3 or 4 days, or it can take a couple of weeks.
Oh dear, I'm a murderer.
But again, it's all about learning. It's all about learning.
Right, exactly. My grandmother had an absolute green thumb. She had a beautiful vegetable garden. She had a ton of plants indoors. I never had that green thumb, except a year and a half ago. It's like a gene activated, and I needed to have plants all throughout my house. So I went on a binge, and I bought all sorts of lovely plants, mostly low light plants. And I think it's called a queen marble pothos plant. Which is one of them, and it grows long vines. And after a year and a half, it grew to like 8. They grew about 8 feet long, and I was so proud of it. I didn't know what to do with the vines. Of course, I had to learn. So proud of it. I was so proud that I've kept all of my plants alive and well, except for the poor aloe vera. And then recently, because I'm moving in 3 weeks across the continent, I gave all my houseplants away. And when I did, I cried, which I feel absurd about doing.
No,
but
not at all.
You mentioned about pride, like when
I
care for something for a long time, and it made
I totally get it.
Yeah, it beautified my house, and it's almost. I almost became I feel ridiculous saying this. I almost became attached to the houseplants, and when I got rid of them, I was like, "What have I done? Like, what's their fate? What's going to happen to them? I took care of them."
It's that exactly. It's the knowing that you've put so much time, care, love into those plants, and people go, "Oh, that's ridiculous." The people who say it's ridiculous have never owned a houseplant. Okay, they don't get it. I've got a story that completely correlates with that. And when I was very briefly in a flat, there was this very sad-looking monstera or cheese plant, and I was on the top floor, and it was sort of hanging over the banister of the main staircase that led up to the top flats. And I emailed the housekeeper, the lady who looked after the block, and it wasn't a very big block at all. I think there was 15 flats in there, all sort of like 2-roomed flats. They were quite small. And I emailed her and I said, what's the deal with this monstera? Because it was in a very sorry state. It was in a pot that was too small. There was a cat that constantly, did its business in and around the pot. And I thought, you're killing this poor monstera. So it's now called Della's monstera. It is now in my house. So she said, it was given to me as a gift when I was in my office. I didn't know what to do with it, so I kind of left it here. And she didn't know what to do, so she said, just take it, do something with it. So I took it in, I repotted it, I gave it a support, I looked after it, etc. It was about 5.5 foot, nearly 6 foot at that point when I got its supports up. It is now over 7 foot, and I have no idea how the hell I'm going to get it out of my house if we ever move. It's a bit too comfortable up in the spare room, but it has grown massively. So I constantly tell Della about how her plant is doing. It's had a couple of offshoots, which I have then passed on to my sister. She's got a couple of the baby Della monsteras, as I call them now, and I said to her, I said, how old is this monstera plant? Because of the vast size of it, I thought, it was given to you big, or it really has been abandoned for quite a few years. So I found out this plant is actually now 26 years old.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I was like, oh my God, I cannot kill this plant. So, but I will admit, I do have houseplants. But I actually kind of abandon them. The houseplants have to be hardy in my house because I tend to spend more time outside and my houseplants get abandoned. But I do have quite a few dotted around. And it's a case of, I will spend maybe like once a month giving them a prune, giving them a feed, but I won't do an awful lot with them. But I completely get the heartfelt, if I would never give up that Monstera now, because I feel like I've taken it on, I've given it love, it's blossomed so much that, and I've got somebody else as well who's sort of relying on me to keep it alive. And it also became apparent because she was quite an elderly lady, and she said she couldn't handle it anymore, and that was when it was back in the flat, and it was a bit of a mess, and it was quite a big plant. I mean, it took 2 of us to move it up the stairs. Here we've got a very narrow staircase, so I think we've decided if we ever do move, it's going to have to be winched out the window, and we're just going to have to hope that it fits through there. It's definitely wider than the window. It's not going to fit.
Wow.
It's quite vast. I will try and take a photo this week, and I will post it on my Twitter for those who are now interested in my giant Monstera. But yeah, I completely get it. I get the attachment almost to these plants, because you do care about them. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but there has been a bit of a sort of houseplant fad going on. So it is very much a trend that took off during the lockdown era. And people wanted to bring the outside inside, which again, I can understand. I was lucky enough to have a garden. But houseplant prices are something that I will just cry at now. If I see a houseplant in a shop, I'm thinking, oh my god, I don't even want to estimate the price of that Monstera upstairs now, because of the prices of the ones I've seen that are sort of quarter the size of that one. And it's painful to see. Like, gardening is not how would you put it? It's not a. Do you know what I'm getting at? I can't think of the word, but the price, as soon as you say gardening, the price just goes up. Oh, it's a house plant, therefore I'm going to whack a massive price sticker on it.
Not a cliche, not a fetish, not. I think I understand what you're trying to say. Like, it's something that it's personal, and you put your heart and soul into it. It's not a fad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that, again, as I mentioned earlier, that the serotonin boost, it happens with houseplants as well.
Really?
You don't just have to be out. It works with houseplants as well. So it's the same soil structure. So it's the same thing.
That's interesting, because it almost seems like we were designed to work with the earth. If our body responds so positively to working with soil.
Humans are meant to be. This is I've had this opinion for years. So if people don't like this, fine. But humans are meant to be outside. They are meant to be within nature. I'm not a hippie, but if I spend a weekend in a city, I start climbing the walls. I need to see some green somewhere. You'll see me hugging a plant in the corner, thinking, this is the only nature that's in here. I can't do it. I genuinely get weird in cities with tons of concrete and structures. And no, I have to be able to look out my window and see green. I have to be able to walk down the road and go to a field. I mean, I'm very, very lucky where I am now. I can look out the window and see fields. But, we're very much, humans we're always outside. Historically, we've always been working with nature. Don't start working against it now. If you've got plants that are overrun in your garden, then either let them grow or just manage it. Don't just let it go mad. You can manage it and work with it. That's the whole point. Work with it.
Right. I'm in the same boat. I'm a hiker. I love being outdoors. It's where I get to focus, I get to think, and there's nothing boring around you. Just looking at a leaf, looking at a bug, looking at a rock, looking at the weather. It's gorgeous. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I see that in my son. Indoors, he's tearing the house apart. When he's outdoors, he's focused. He's engaged.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. He needs a good 4 or 5 hours a day outside. It's incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I would never understand the people who go outside and they're staring at their phones whilst they're walking, or they quite literally have the blinkers on and they're just staring at their feet. Even walking, because I walk to work, and even walking to work, I give myself an extra sort of 10 minutes because I get distracted by everything. I'm terrible. I'll be walking down the road, I hear a nice bird, I turn around and I watch the bird in the tree. I see a nice plant. I'm like, oh, that's pretty. I'll stare at it, whatever. And I love it, going anywhere. And I walk that road every week. And yet there is always something new that I see. There is always something that catches my attention. There's always something to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Something
Phones are horribly boring in comparison. I drive the country roads instead of the highway most of the time too, for that very same reason. Right? Yeah, it's an extra 5-10 minutes, but it's so beautiful. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It's, plants need the special formula to survive and to thrive, humans as well. And I think an element of that is definitely being outdoors. You've
100%.
on the same page there.
I mean, I used to get told off as a kid because I used to walk outside with no shoes or socks on all the time. And my mum was like, you're going to hurt your feet, you're going to get bitten by something, you're going to get stung. And touch wood, I never did. On my feet anyway. I did get stung elsewhere, but that's because it was normally my fault because I was playing with a certain bug or being stupid. But no, I've never, again, touch wood, had any issues. And I do it here as well. If I'm just popping outside or if I see, if I'm just sat sort of looking out the window and I see a weed and I'm like, that's really annoying me, I will just go out and pick it. I'll be like, nope, got to get rid of that. And it's barefoot outside. It's, people can say what they like about it, but I find it comforting. I don't do it 24/7. I'm not a case. I don't have dirty feet. Okay, I'm not. Let's not go down that route.
Oh yeah, I understand. You're not a poor Claire nun who goes around without shoes on because it's too luxurious.
Yeah. I mean, people always call me in my other app Alex Hobbits, and there is a reason for that. But I do have clean feet. It's okay, guys.
Yeah, and hopefully not hairy, right?
No, definitely not.
Hobbits.
Definitely not. My feet are tiny as well, so I mean, I don't fit the Hobbit style at all. I've got very tiny feet, so.
All right, I'm glad we got that cleared up. Oh, this is completely unrelated, but I wonder if you had an opinion about it. Compost.
Yes.
Please.
What do you want to know?
Oh, well, do you recycle? Do you plants? I mean, you probably have vegetables that you eat. Like, do you compost the stems of them? Does compost work? Yeah. Does compost not work on some plants? What can you use? What can't you use? Yeah, I'm interested to hear your opinion.
This is quite funny actually, because I was talking to my work colleague last week about compost because she's been having some real issues with her compost, and I was writing down all the hints and tips for her, and I got a magazine through as well. So I'm a member of the National Allotment Society, and they have a 3-monthly magazine, and their most recent one actually had a bit about compost. And because both me and Alex are members, we got two copies. So I gave her this copy and she read it and she was like, oh my God, it's everything you said. I was like, yeah, but at least you've got it in writing now. So
yeah, right.
But yeah, so I use my own compost. We make our own compost. I've got 2 compost bins in the garden. I don't put any cooked food in there. So that is my number one rule, is I will not put any cooked food in compost. So I will put tea bags, absolutely fine. Vegetable peelings, fine. Coffee grounds as well. Coffee grounds are good. And again, the slugs don't really like coffee. So having a little bit, and I don't major point is do not overload your compost with coffee grounds. And that's the main problem my colleague had, is because of the cafe we have down there. We grind fresh coffee every single time we make a single coffee. It's freshly ground. So naturally we had quite a few coffee grounds, and her compost was absolutely teeming with it. And coffee grounds are great for holding moisture as well. So actually mixing a few in is not going to do any harm at all. Turning your compost is a big thing. Aerate it. I mean, I know, again, there's so many different styles of gardening. This is just personally how I do it, and it works for me. Obviously, if it doesn't work for you, absolutely fine. Of course, there's no dig going on, and I'm a digger. I do dig. So we make a point of turning the compost. So because we've got 2 compost bins, we have one that's always kind of the fresh stuff. If we've just cracked some eggs, the eggshells go in there as well. any sort of non-invasive weeds. So I mean things that aren't incredibly vigorous. So if you just pull up, a couple of dandelions, chop them up a bit, they can go on the compost, not a problem. Grass clippings as well, that sort of thing, can all go on the compost. So they're actually sat on concrete, so we can lift them up and actually turn the compost over. And by turning it, I literally just mean getting a fork in there and just giving it a bit of a mix.
Okay.
Not everybody agrees with this. Now, we won't turn it, immediately. We'll kind of give it 3-4 months, then we'll give it a turn. Now, this works personally for me. It has worked very well for the past 3 or 4 years. We've been doing it here. I will use that compost up the allotment. I'll use it for my potting plants. I use it for bedding plants. I use it absolutely everywhere. It is like rocket fuel. So I do mix it with just some soil from the beds that are already in the garden, or I will mix it with some like really cheap compost that you can pick up from supermarket, like the really, really cheap stuff that basically has no nutrients in it whatsoever, and it's basically black. It's horrible stuff. But if you mix it up with something else, then you're okay. Yeah, the really cheap stuff is fine if you mix it with something else. I have fallen prey to this many, many times in the past. It holds the moisture. It will basically be a brick, and it doesn't have an awful lot of nutrients in it. That's why it's cheap.
Okay.
So yeah, I compost 100%, and it saves a lot of money, hell of a lot of money. Actually making your own compost, because I'm sure you know yourself, but compost is not cheap. Even the cheapest compost, you need a few bags to fill up a pot or a bed. It does add up. So if you do make your own, you're not only reducing the scraps and all the what would be considered sort of smelly waste that goes in your bin and has to sit there for a week. It's going straight outside. And the number one tip and the number one rule I will say to anyone is, if your compost is working and if you're doing it correctly, it will not smell.
Interesting.
It will not actually smell. If it smells like it's rotting or it's damp, then you're doing something wrong or it needs attention. Yeah, because I've had a couple of comments in the past like, oh no, I can't, I don't like the idea of having compost because of all the flies and the smell. If you've got flies, if you've got a smell, you're doing something wrong. Now, you're gonna have bugs, whatever, around it. I have quite a high population of various kinds of birds in my garden, and they are always around the compost bins. They love it. So natural pest control for me. And if you can as well, if the bugs and the worms will find it. If your compost is doing well, you're doing it correctly, then the worms will find it. I have known people to actually buy worms or have a wormery and add them to their compost, because they are very good at breaking the soil down. They're very good at breaking everything down. And they will be absolutely fine. We'll dig up our own compost and put it in the pots or whatever, and there will always be worms in there. They're harmless, absolutely fine. Worms are good. If you've got worms in your soil, they're good.
That's a good sign. But I'm curious, why is a smelly compost a bad compost?
So if it smells, it means you've got some sort of bacteria growth that you ideally don't want there. So that could be down to too much moisture, which can cause mold as well. So don't forget, if you're putting like eggshells in there, if you're putting tea bags in there, I don't know if you've never washed a teapot, or you shouldn't wash a teapot anyway. But if you leave tea bags on the side for too long and they go all green and furry, it's gross. If you actually put them in the compost, that's not going to happen, because they mix in with everything else. So if you've got a smell, it means that something has quite literally gone off, or there's something in there that shouldn't be. A bit of cooked food has got in there, or whatever it may be. And the eggs as well. People think, if you're putting eggshells in, another thing I've had sort of conversations about is the eggshells. I've known a lot of people to wash their eggshells before they put them in the compost. I've never done that, ever. I have never washed my eggshells. They have been absolutely fine, and they do not smell, because we've got it to a point, because we've used the same bins for quite a few years. So we've got it to a point where it's now basically self-sustaining. So when you add more things and we turn it, it's almost immediately breaking down as soon as you put it in. So your compost should not smell at all. I've just had a comment from RCW saying never use compost indoors, you'll get gnats. If it's homemade compost, yeah, you need to be careful about bringing it inside, because homemade compost will have more bugs, more animals living in it. You know, you'll get your worms, you'll get your wood lice, you'll get gnats, bugs, etc. in there. You don't really want to bring that in the house for obvious reasons. So I do agree with that. I will advise, if you do make your own compost, it is 100% best used outside.
How about meat or fat?
No.
No? Okay.
Hard no. No, absolutely not. I've never never will put any form of meat, because again, even if it's raw meat, you don't want that, because you start enticing a whole different kind of bacteria that isn't always good, especially if you live in a hot climate, or even if you have, even if you have a very hot day, you will essentially have rotting meat, because at the end of the day, it is breaking down. You want to have things that break down cleanly. And even if you have, there is that argument there, if you've got the bugs and insects that will do that for you. But don't forget, this is a soil substance that you will be around a lot, and you'll be adding to it. So you don't want that. You do not want decomposing meat substances or bones or anything. It's no, absolutely not. And of course, then you start enticing all kinds of other problems if you start doing that as well.
Okay. And did I just hear you say you should not wash the inside of a teapot? Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, you should never scrub your teapot. Come on.
Is this kind of like a patina on like cast iron? Like you shouldn't remove it?
Yeah,
is that sort of the same idea?
It's very much a British thing. I've never washed my teapot. And people go, oh, that's gross. I rinse it out. Okay, I'm not disgusting. I take the tea bags out. If I'm making a fresh pot, I'll get rid of the old ones. I'll empty out any liquid that's left, and I may rinse it with a bit of cold water and just swill it out, but I have never scrubbed my teapot, because it actually changes the flavor of the tea. So if you're constantly scrubbing your teapot, then you're never going to get that proper tea tannin taste to the proper taste of tea. I think it's more common in England than it is everywhere else. But
okay.
Yeah, I've never done it, and my family's never done it, and I know other people's families have never done it. We don't wash our teapots.
I blame my tea drinking proclivity to Canada being sort of a British colony and that sort of thing. So I drink tea with milk, which for some people freaks them out a little bit. But I haven't been sophisticated, educated enough to learn not to wash up my teapot. So okay, good to know. I will do it the authentic way now. I promise.
I always find it weird when I say that to people, because it's so normal over here. I just don't think about it. It's so normal just to wash your teapot.
Oops. Okay, well, now I know. Thank you.
I know.
All right. That's actually most of my questions. So
wow, we powered through. We powered through.
We did, yeah. Well, that's very, very, very interesting. It's kind of cool that you're a total nerd for gardening. I mean, you really know a lot. It's fascinating.
I find it awkward because I never really considered myself to be a nerd for gardening, as you say, until sort of the past couple of years when I actually started getting more attention for it, if that makes sense. So when people actually started purposefully coming up to see my garden, or to, obviously, I said earlier, the award I got last year for my garden, and getting sort of recognition for what I was doing. I never thought I knew that much, and it does great. I'm still learning. Every gardener is still learning. And that is something to always remember. It doesn't matter how much you know, and there's so much I still don't know. I don't know all of the Latin names for the plants at all. I love my dahlias, don't get me wrong. I've got 5 different varieties outside. Can I name them all? No, absolutely not. It's and that's okay. That's absolutely fine. And that's part and parcel of it. You know, it's, you don't have to have a green thumb in order to have a green thumb.
Right. Yeah. So it's just basically, it's because you've been doing it since you're a child. You just accumulated a bunch of knowledge, right, over the many years, and you end up now. Like I kind of find this with music. I knew more than what I thought I did, but I also don't know as much as I thought I did.
Yes.
Right. The more I get into that craft. So cool.
Absolutely. And you know, I will wholeheartedly admit that if people ask me something that I don't know, like I've learned a lot through experience from gardening and by watching other people, or I do have quite a few various forms of gardening books. So if anyone does have any other questions, then I will see if it's in any of my books, because I have quite a few various different forms. And it is a case of, with experience wise, I am still learning, as I said earlier, but I know for a fact there is still a buttload I do not know about gardening. You know, there's so much, or it will be a case of, because there is so much to know about gardening, I will often forget. So like with I've got some fruit trees in the garden, and it's a case of, right, when do I need to prune that one? And I will go and refer back to my books, or I do have a gardening journal which is sat next to me at the moment, and I will write notes in there, because I do just point blank forget what I'm doing, because I'll be focusing on something else, and I go, oh, that needs attention. Like, when can I do that? You know,
right.
so,
You mentioned you get distracted.
Yeah,
so.
Very easily.
Right.
Especially when it comes to gardening. Like, this nice butterfly goes past. I'm like, oh, that's nice. I'm like, what was I doing? Like, where was this plant meant to go? And I'm just walking around with a pot. You know, I've so many times. My neighbors think I'm crazy. But yeah,
oh, that's fine.
You can definitely make a garden your own. Everyone has different styles, different ways of doing it. You know, personally, I'm very much to the Edwardian style. I do like my sort of clean edges, but I do have a couple of, you know, like a messy border. I do have a wildflower strip. I do have a patch underneath a very old cherry tree, which does not fruit anymore. I have to admit, it's just sort of there because it's nice.
That's what I was going to ask. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask, do you like the wild looking garden, or do you like the manicured looking garden? And it kind of sounds like you like both.
Yeah,
mixture.
Absolutely. My garden is 100% a mixture of both. So I have two. So my garden is not big by any means. It is the width of the house, and that's sort of it. You know, it's a very odd shape. It's basically a long sort of. It's not even a long triangle. It's basically a triangle.
Okay.
The lawns are very small, so there's actually 3 separate lawns. But because we live on a hill, there's one lawn that's sort of flat but is a triangle shape and has 3 trees in it. And then there's the lawn on the hill, which I call the top lawn because it's just the highest point of the garden, which is one hell of a slope.
Okay.
It's like a dome shape. It's ridiculous and quite difficult to cut. And then there's what I call the bottom lawn or the bottom triangle, which I do tend to leave a little bit messy, because, you know, the rabbits tend to go down there quite a lot, and I don't mind it being messy. It's under a couple of larger trees. So I don't mind it at all. The other 2 I do tend to keep neat. But running along sort of the flattish triangle lawn up the top, there is it used to be a path. It's not anymore. It's now a wildflower strip, which, if you stand at the side of the house, does actually line up with the messy lawn down the bottom. So it does kind of all link up. You know, I'm not, you know, my garden is not pristine by any means. You know, I am happy with it, so that's all that matters. And then when I say I've got loads of pots, we don't have a back garden. We have basically a square of tarmac / concrete / whatever it decides to be, that is covered in pots, and that's where I think some people might have seen it on my Twitter. If you haven't, go follow me. I post a lot about my garden. I will admit it's my guilty habit if I post a lot of gardening pictures. We do have 2 raised beds at the back of the house with all the pots, Before we got the allotments, that's what we grew our veg in. I still do use them to grow veg in as well. It's quite useful. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both, really. I do have a couple of books on like Edwardian gardens because I just think they're absolutely stunning, and the different sort of shapes and the lines they have, and it's so pristine. And I do think to myself that I know how much time it takes for me to edge my dumbass lawn at the top that's really annoying to cut. So I do have a little bit of garden envy for them, but I can also relate in how much time and effort has has been taken in order to have that garden looking so sharp, and I do go to a lot of we have the National Trust over here, and I do go to a lot of National Trust gardens, and I do get a lot of garden envy, because they do employ private gardeners, and yeah, it is very impressive to see. Very impressive.
Awesome. Also, congratulations on your accolades for your garden. That's a nice perk.
Thank you. Yeah, it was very much unexpected, which is always the nicest form, I think.
Yes, I agree.
Do we have anything else to share? I think we've definitely established that gardening is a very high maintenance hobby.
Yes. I don't have any more questions for gardening. So unless you have questions or you have anything you want to add.
I think the only you've asked me so many questions. I feel like I need to fire a couple back at you if you're happy to stay on for a couple more minutes.
Sure.
So in terms of, you've obviously questioned me and grilled me about my garden. Do you said you don't have a green thumb, but you've clearly done some gardening. You've had your houseplants. So what's your kind of idea and attitude towards gardening, if that makes sense?
I never really thought of it. When I hear gardening, I think of like grooming. I think raking up the leaves. I think of weeding. So basically that chore bit of it, and like a sore back or
so
pruning.
Do you see it as tidying up?
Yeah, I view gardening when someone says the word gardening, I think of tidying up. Absolutely, grooming the outside. That sort of thing, getting rid of dead plants and just making sure everything's fresh and everything looks good. But for my house plants, they're like low light, low maintenance, but I have to look at their health. One plant kept wilting, and I repotted it in a bigger pot, and it just blossomed, and it was wonderful. It's a very simple fix. And now I view gardening as, well, it just makes the house more inviting, bringing the nature inside. They're beautiful to look at, the plants, and my tortoises love walking under them and through them. So, yeah, so it made their life, I hope, I'm imagining, a lot better. And it's just more of an aesthetic thing for me. But it sounds like, because the amount of discipline that you've put in your gardening, which is kind of, I guess, a discipline I've put within my music. You created something beautiful, but it also kind of makes us better people too. It makes us more disciplined people, makes us more patient people. I think makes us wiser people as well, just simply as the discipline. And I think this ties up to how we were describing a low maintenance woman, is that our creative energy is put outward instead of inward. And yet that makes us, I believe, more beautiful in the long run by developing these sort of virtues through our hobbies. So, oh, sorry, I diverted from the gardening question. I think that pretty much sums it up. It's grooming and it's beautifying the space. That's how I view gardening.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with that more. As I said earlier on in the stream, that I view the garden as an extension to your house, and to your home even. So even bringing the garden in can do that. And of course, I've spoken and given advice to a lot of people who don't have gardens as well. So they might just have some large windowsills, or they might just have a balcony. And again, I've referred to various books, or have done, given them some advice from personal experience. As I said earlier, I did live in a flat which had a very large window
Mhm.
So I did have a lot of plants. I mean, you could tell which flat was mine because you'd look at the window and it was just plants. It
Mhm.
was
Yeah,
very green. Like
that's
they knew
funny.
where I lived. So I used to get friends going, "Oh, how would I know which one's yours?" I'm like, "You'll know. Don't worry, you'll know." Whereas now, you look at the house and there are some plants in the windows, but um, because I'm lucky enough to have a garden, that is the extension of my home. So it is, as I see it, it's a direct reflection on what the house is like. And of course, because we do actually rent our house as well, there is only a certain amount that we can do. So I can't go digging up the lawn or anything like that. I can't do anything major. So it has taken 3 years to get it to the state it's in now.
Mhm.
And by that, it's been a constant sort of watching and nurturing and changing certain things, and figuring out what works where, and yeah, having some failures and going, okay, well, that doesn't work. And actually, a prime example of that, I think it's my banner on my Twitter page at the moment on my profile, is a watering can in a very neatly dug sort of strip. That is now the wildflower strip, because not an awful lot survives in there. It is probably the worst place for plants to survive in my garden. But
Mm.
wildflowers do great. Wildflowers and weeds love it. So I just thought, you know what? If that's what it wants, if that's what wants to grow there, then I will just manage that and I'll enhance it. So it is. It's always a learning curve. And when people sort of start off gardening, I will always tell them, like, don't jump the gun. Don't expect to get an instant garden.
Mhm.
Figure out, especially if it's a new home or a new garden or whatever it may be. Watch where the sun sets in the evening. Watch where it comes up in the morning. Watch which areas get the most sun during the day. Work out what plants are already there, because 9 times out of 10, if you have taken on a new house or a new garden, then there's probably things already in the ground you didn't know about.
Right.
Here we have crocuses and mini daffodils that come up every year. I never put them there. They have been there for years. As far as I'm concerned, they were put in way before we even knew about this place. But they come up every year, and all
Mhm.
I've done is kind of manage them. They were already there, so instead of me going, "Oh, I don't want them there, I'm going to move them," I just let them be there because they're obviously happy there. And you just work with it, work with what you already have, and then you can add things to make it your own, which is what I've done here. Um, but there are so many different styles and types. Again, even if you don't have a garden, it will not stop you from gardening. Having pots is still gardening. You don't have to have bare earth in order to garden.
Mm.
You don't have to have a garden to be a gardener. You can have pots, you can have house plants, you can grow nearly everything in a pot, and you can grow almost everything inside if you do it correctly.
Hmm.
Challenge accepted, I think, is what
Yeah.
I heard from you then.
Yeah, my son actually just grew a pot of carrots
There you go.
this season. Yeah, very
Carrots
easy.
hate me. Carrots hate me. It's a bit of a
Really?
running joke in this house that my carrots always fail. So my parents bought us some homemade, like, already built carrot beds for Christmas, and some seeds, and I still haven't planted them up because I'm terrified that it's all going to go wrong. And to be fair, the seasons past from planting carrots now anyway. But yes, I used to be able to grow them with my parents at their allotment, and we could grow carrots absolutely fine. But when it comes to me growing them on my own, I have failed every single time, and I am not afraid to say that. And I love carrots. Can I grow them? Absolutely not. Um,
Yeah, that's.
it's it's just
I
the
thought
way it
they'd
is.
be simple, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
huh.
But it's one of those things that whether it's I honestly don't know at this point. So again, I will keep trying. They're not going to elude me just yet. Um, I will try, and I have tried various different techniques so far, but I will keep trying more techniques because as I said earlier in the stream, it can be completely down to the climate where you live, the soil, absolutely everything can affect what plants you can grow and how you grow them, etc., and how much you control it. So if you've got, let's say, an indoor garden, you have way more control over the elements. Whereas you can turn the heating up or down, you can open the window, you can change the moisture level, absolutely everything. You can test soil structure, everything you have control of. Whereas with an outdoor garden, only half of it is within your control, because you are working with or sometimes against nature. You've got more pests, soil structure's different, you've got the weather, absolutely everything. So you just have to work with that. And of course, the weather changes constantly. So you've just got to sort of, it's been raining all day here, and it's the first rain we've had for at least a month.
Wow.
It's been ridiculous down here. Everyone around us is getting rain, and then this little part of Cornwall's like, nope, no, I'm not getting anything. So I'm very glad to see the rain, I have to admit. Let's not say that too loudly, because if I get flooded now. but yeah, my water barrels are dry, so I did need some rain. But these are all things you work with, and that's what makes it very high maintenance, is because it doesn't have to be, that's the controversy here, I think, because gardening doesn't have to be high maintenance. But if it is one of your main hobbies, then 100% it's gonna be high maintenance. It's gonna take a lot of your time. But if it is a hobby, it's obviously something you're passionate about, so you're going to naturally want to spend more time doing it and put a lot of love and care into what you're doing, as you do with any hobby you're passionate about, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree. I would consider gardening, though, to be more of a B or C tier hobby for me. But nonetheless, it's been low maintenance for me just with the house plants. But the effect of having them in my home has been wonderful. So it was worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though a lot of people say, oh, well, it's a bit of a cliche that plants can have such an effect. If you haven't tried it, then you're clearly the one saying that. It does actually have an effect on your mood, on how your home feels, whether it's an inside or outside garden. It does actually make a difference.
Yeah, even scientifically, as you said, with serotonin, etc. Yeah.
Which is incredible, really.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have any other comments?
I do not.
Okay, I think we've wrapped that one up. Is there any from? There's a couple of comments I will read out from the chat. Another one from RCW here. Installing a sturdy wall trellis is satisfying. I felt emancipated after a climbing plant came off the wall during heavy rain. Yes, that is very depressing. Yeah, it's not just the plants. Make sure your structures are safe too, if you're putting plants up. But yeah, no, absolutely. As we mentioned earlier about actually being upset if one of your plants decides to off itself. What else do we have here? I've not really been reading these. I'm just kind of looking at them now, so I do apologize for those who have commented. One from Ross Lewis here, from very early on in the stream. I always thought low maintenance was from the man's perspective, as in I don't have to buy her stuff all of the time. I don't have to pay too much attention to her emotions, etc. Yeah, I would agree to that to a certain extent. And I was actually talking to a previous Wamen Hour host. I don't know if anybody does remember Gagging Flit, also known as Amy. About gardening, because she's taken up gardening herself, so we do have chats about gardening and hints and tips and things. And she was saying that in her opinion, low maintenance, a high maintenance woman is, in terms of how she sees it, was a woman who has a lot of emotions and she needs a lot of attention in terms of the way she is mentally, if that makes sense. Not in those exact words, because she sent it to me over a text and I can't remember exactly what she said, but in those terms, which is another take on it, to be honest. But that's why we do gardening. It improves our mood. Again, Ross Lewis, here because of Tilting Turtles tweet. So there you go. Followed your tweet. Thank you for coming and listening. RCW, this is an interesting one. Heaven is basically a perfect garden with a perfect lawn. Is that how you see heaven? I mean, I'm not complaining because I
People who've seen heaven supposedly say that there's a garden there with colors that you've never seen before.
Yes,
So.
but of course, there's the story of the Garden of Eden as well,
right?
Which is supposedly a perfect garden. Now, in my personal opinion, there is no such thing as a perfect garden, because if you look close enough, there's always going to be a hole in a leaf somewhere, or bug crawling somewhere you don't want it to be.
But that's the beauty.
Yeah, that's what I would consider to be natural. That's nature. That's how it is. Call a shield maiden, daily dose of fields. Accurate. And Lukey World, feeling carrot pilled. I will definitely take that. I don't think there's anything left to shill. Otherwise, follow us on Twitter. I do post a lot of gardening pictures. If anybody does want those, I will put up my garlic spray recipe for anyone who wants it. Do pop me a message if you do want it. It is my golden. I've shared this recipe with so many people now, and they swear by it just as much as I do. And I get daily updates, which I find hilarious, of people's updates with how they're doing with the garlic spray. Support me on Ko-Fi as well. That link is down below to keep us going. Gardening is a high maintenance hobby. Just to clarify as well, we've obviously spoken a lot about me spending a lot of time in my garden. That is not my job, okay? That is just a hobby. I'm not a paid gardener anymore. I gave up that job because I'm now very busy with my other job and doing other things. So I do it for nothing. That is just my hobby, and gardening is expensive. So please help us on Ko-Fi. And free plants are always great. Turtle, your Twitter link is below as well. Do you have anything to shill before we sign off?
Sure. Speaking of hobbies, if you enjoy Magic the Gathering, please subscribe to my channel, which it revolves around Magic the Gathering. There it is.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much for joining me this evening. It's been fun. I hope you've learned something.
I certainly have. Absolutely.
Grilling me with all your questions. Of course, if anybody does have any topic suggestions, then please do comment, send us a message. We're always happy to review topic suggestions on Wamen. And of course, if you do know any Wamen, or you are Wamen yourself who want to join the group, there are quite a few of us in the background chatting away in our group chat. If you do want to join, do just send us a message. We're always happy for new Wamen to join, new opinions and new voices. We're always happy for that. So do get hold of us. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.